So on request I wanted to make this guide for Zeta. This guide is not meant for people that are pretty familiar with the character already. It's more for people that are trying to get into the character and don't know where to start, or people that are new to fighting games in general and just are interested in this character. This guide will be split into 3 main sections: super beginner, beginner, and intermediate. So each section builds off of each other, but each of them are also catered towards a specific skill level. So if you consider yourself as an intermediate player, I would say watching all the way through will provide you some value if you're getting into the character for the first time, but it will get into some more intricate tactics and game plans that you can establish with the character at the intermediate section, where if you're very new to fighting games, the super beginner section is highly recommended, as it will teach you what key tools you should use in order to improve on your fundamentals and get familiar with the game and your character. And as you progress in skill level, I recommend just keep watching further into the guide as you improve. At the end of the guide, you should have a pretty good understanding of the character and be able to start developing your own game plan around Zeta. So let's get into the type of character that this is. Zeta is a mid-screen mix-up control character that gets in by varying her timing and approaches to catch the opponent, pressing buttons, and not respecting your offense. Starting in the super beginner section. The super beginner section will just go over fundamental tools. So starting with those tools, we have the key normals: 5L, 2L, 5M, and 2H. And we'll go over them individually, starting with 5M. 5M is a pretty good mid-screen poke tool that you can use to stop the opponent from running in or starting their offense. It's also a pretty good way to start practicing your hit confirms, which I'll show you one at the end of the section. Another good tool that you can use to keep them out is 2H. 2H is an anti-air tool, but when we get into specials, we can talk about this a little bit more. And then 5L and 2L, I'd say, are pretty good tools in order to stop opponents from running their offense. And what I mean by that is, if they have you in the corner, 5L is actually a very fast move at 5 frames, and it's +4, meaning that it's not their turn anymore and you can start doing whatever you like. 2L is a pretty good tool for poking if they're trying to run in. It'll stop their approach and it's safe on block. It isn't your turn, but because it is a low, it's a pretty good way to check if they're blocking low or for them to start respecting your low pokes. Now moving on to specials, we have light laser, down special, and her dash. Starting with down special, this is going to be your primary anti-air tool, as it is air unblockable, meaning if they try to jump in and block whatever hit you're trying to hit them with, they will just get hit out of it and they'll be put into a knockdown situation. And as you can see, she gets soft knockdown, which means you can start running your own pressure. So 2H is a pretty solid anti-air move, but it can be blocked on jump in, so I would just be careful with that. It is negative, so it puts you in a bad situation if they do block it. So just doing the air unblockable special is far more consistent in establishing your pressure afterwards. Let's talk about her dash. Her dash is a pretty good tool to use in neutral because it's very good for getting in. You do have 3 versions of it, which is the light version, the medium version, and the heavy version. The light and the medium version only have 1 follow-up, whereas the EX version has 2 follow-ups. We'll go into the follow-ups a lot more later, but for now, if you are using this tool, I recommend just dashing in and out with your light, medium, and heavy versions. It's a somewhat complicated move to use, and using it poorly will lead you into situations where you're very negative and you will get punished for it very hard. So it's a tricky tool that you can use and vary your approaches, but for now just use it more like I poke you and get out. You can practice hit confirming it, so if you do see a hit confirm, you can just go in and do a natural combo, even with the medium version and with the light version. The main difference between each version is that the light version doesn't go as far and only has 1 follow-up. The medium version goes a lot farther and also has 1 follow-up, whereas the EX version goes around the same distance as the medium version and has 2 follow-ups. And just get used to hit confirming it into itself. As far as your pressure goes, now that you're in, you do want to start using 66L, which is the universal pressure tool that everyone has. 66L into L, which gives you positive frames. Also, it can catch them mashing if you time it correctly. If the opponent is mashing light, which is their fastest move, you will beat them with your light just because of those +2 frames. So now you can go into a hit confirm off of that. Or you can just re-establish pressure by running back in and doing another 6XL and making them scared of your follow-ups. And then once they're blocking a lot more and they're not mashing as much, you can now, instead of doing 6XL, you can run in and grab them. At the lowest level, a lot of people won't tech this, so you should be fine to throw this out every once in a while after they stop mashing. The main thing is to get them to stop mashing. The last thing I do want to cover in the super beginner section is the hit confirm that you can do. This hit confirm leads into a combo that's a little bit difficult to do, so the main reason why I'm having you do it now is so that you get used to using the tool itself. For example, in the mid screen, this hit confirm will look like this at the very beginner level, which is simply doing any button into EX dashes. The EX dashes do a light knockdown, which means you can start running in and trying to do your pressure again. So now entering the beginner section of the guide, we can start talking about what makes Zeta pretty special. So for key normals, we have far 5L, U into U spam, jumping U or pogo, and jumping M. Starting with far 5L, this is actually a pretty good poke for when you notice that they're a little bit too close to make medium feel comfortable. You can start throwing out far 5L as kind of an answer to that. It hits high, so it's pretty good in neutral. The only thing I do want to add about this is that when they're crouching, it does whiff on the opponent. As you can see, it whiffs here, but it hits here. Since you have this +1, you can start hitting buttons afterwards and they will come out slightly faster than the opponent. So you can do something like a far 5L into like a medium, or you can do a far 5L into another far 5L depending on the distancing. But it's a pretty good tool to use in order to keep the opponent out and kind of keep your turn. Now for U into U spam, this is generally how you're going to end your pressure string. So if you're all the way up here and you're hitting the opponent and you do like an auto combo, you can do U into U and it pushes you back quite a bit, so you kind of lose pressure. But the reason why it's kind of good as well is because now you can start using your dashes again. For pogo, pogo is actually a pretty good tool mid-screen and in the corner, just for establishing pressure and doing some mix-ups. With pogo, you can either do pogo into itself up to 3 times. As you can see on the left, if I'm spamming it, it doesn't go any more than 3. You can also do a pogo into that jumping medium that I was talking about, which is actually pretty good, because jumping medium actually puts you in a position where you're +5, so you can continue your pressure. Or you can do jumping medium into maybe a grab. So let me do that one more time. As you can see, it kind of goes into each other. Or you can do the jumping medium into a low. Or you can just do empty low. Or you can even just do an empty grab after the pogo. So I did just cover how to use jumping medium, but I just wanted to cover it a little bit more right now. And the main thing I wanted to cover is that it is a pretty good cross-up tool. Because of the way it sweeps under you, you can kind of time it so that it hits either side, and it's pretty consistent in the hit. And as you saw earlier, depending on how deep you hit it, you'll get different positive frames. I believe at the most shallow, you get like +5 or +4, and then the deeper you go with the hit, the more plus frames you get. As you see, like +12 with a really deep hit, +11, +12, or even if you hit it very shallow, you still have plus frames to start doing pressure. But it is a pretty good get-in tool and cross-up tool. So do use this tool after getting like a soft knockdown and you're kind of close. You can threaten the pogo pressure, of course, or you can just do straight up jumping M and then start your pressure from there. The next special I want to talk about is your counter, which is just back special. The back special has 3 different types, which is light, medium, and then EX. And the light version counters mids and highs, while the medium version counters lows, and they have various follow-ups as well. And the EX version counters both high and low, because you don't have a traditional reversal in an invincible move. Instead, you have this counter. I recommend just getting used to using the EX counter for now, and as you get more comfortable using the tool, you can start realizing that in certain situations you can use the light and then the medium version. But for now, just get used to using the EX version. It has 3 follow-ups, which is light button, medium button, and heavy button. As you can see, they all have different trajectories and hitboxes. For now, I recommend just using the H version. It's pretty safe on block, being only -5. So you can do this, and then now you have air control. So it's very hard to actually punish it for a lot of the opponents. So you can use it in order to actually gain air control, and it's basically your reversal. These other follow-ups I'll talk a lot more about in the intermediate section, but for now just get used to using the H follow-up after a counter. So you can use down special to actually start your dashes in order to actually start your pressure, and get used to using different angles to approach, because some players might try to anti-air, and depending on how tricky you get with the angles, you can make it so that it's extremely hard to actually punish you. As you can see, there's a lot of angles you can go. It's an 8-way movement, meaning you can go in every single direction. So please get used to varying your approach angles and varying the timing as well as to hit. When you do them in quick succession, it actually beats mashing. As you can see there, she's using her fastest move in 5L. So to beat mashing, this also works just into itself. At tip range, as you saw right here, at tip range, it's kind of a true block string. So one thing you can keep in mind is you can delay the second hit so that it catches a masher. If I'm up close and I try to delay it, I get hit. So you do it immediately, but from pretty far away, you may have to slightly delay it. So now that we're using dashes a lot more, including your down special in order to start your dash pressure, I do want you to start using 2H a lot more for anti-airs. Down special is still a great move to use for anti-airs, but now that we're using it for pressure, it might not always be on cooldown. Just a recap of the section, we kind of went over some new tools that you can use for pressure and how to abuse certain situations after a soft knockdown. So after a soft knockdown, you can jump up and then start doing your progo pressure. Now you can use your variable dashes, so you can put pressure from different angles and make it very hard for the opponent to actually know what you're doing. You can bait anti-airs by varying the angle, and also don't be afraid to do something like this where after a light you special. As you can see, she's pressing her fastest button. You can catch it and then you can go back to neutral, or if they block, or if you see this hit confirm, you can do this into a combo. So getting into the intermediate section, we're getting into the nitty-gritty of Zeta, and I wanted to show a couple more tools and some more advanced strategies just to get you started with the character so that you can start developing her even further. We have 5H, which is actually a pretty good tool as a poke. It is -7, but because of the spacing, it's relatively safe. It has a decent amount of active frames. It's slightly faster than your 5M, so I would recommend using this as well in neutral as a poke. If this is at tip range and they're a little bit closer, you can start using 5M, and if they're even a little bit closer than that, you can start using 5L. So you have 5L, 5H, and then 5M. And for each of those distances, they kind of push back into each other, which is pretty nice. But you kind of get the idea. You can start using more of these pokes in order to actually hit confirm. So 2M is actually a pretty good poke tool as well. 2M hits around the same distance as 5H, but the reason why I would say use this a little bit more often than 5H is just because it's a pretty solid poke tool that's only -3, so you don't lose too much of your turn by using this move in neutral. As you can see, it doesn't actually hit low even though it looks like a low, so they can defend it pretty simply, but it's always a good tool to kind of check them if they're trying to run in or something. So I didn't talk about this before, but your sweep is actually a pretty good sweep. It is special cancelable, meaning that after the sweep you can actually just hit confirm it into a combo, or you can make the sweep safe by using it and then dashing out with your dashes. So it's a pretty good tool to use. It hits actually pretty far. The only issue I found is that since it has 2 hits, they can somewhat react to the first hit if you do it a little bit too far, and they can either walk back to whiff punish, they can walk back and then hit a far button to whiff punish, or they can try to jump over it and then hit you from that. So doing it from a distance that the first hit will hit and natural combo into the second hit is probably best. But it is a good tool to use for the knockdown, and then you can start using your pogo pressure. So even in mid screen, it's going to be a very hard move to punish, and then it puts you right back at the distance where you can use your longer reaching pokes and then start using your dash pressure again, and then maybe you can even start thinking about scaring them with jump-ins. We do want to talk about parry a little bit more. Parry, we did say just use the heavy for now back in the beginner section, but now I want you to use it even more often in neutral to either counter some single hitting projectiles. An example is like Anila's sheep. you can counter them, and then you can do these follow-ups. If they are in front of you and trying to run in behind the projectile, you can counter and then do this, and if they're relatively far, it'll hit them. You can kind of see the range. It's pretty good, and because of the distance that it hits, if you hit them at tip range, it's pretty safe, just because it's -9, and you can see at the distance that it is, a lot of moves will not hit from this far. The other thing is if they try to run up and then jump in after a projectile, you can do the counter into the medium follow-up as it hits pretty high. Start throwing this in conjunction with your 2H and then and your EX down special. Keep on using the H follow-up. It's still pretty good even to get in, just because of the angle it's at. So you can use all these tools in together just to not only play keep out, but play neutral good, and then get in, and then start your pogo pressure. Meter usage on this character, for the most part, is pretty good. The EX, the meter dash version, is actually a pretty good way to get a wall bounce, even in the mid screen. So you can do this kind of thing, and as you can see, it bounces all the way back to you. So it's a pretty good way to combo in mid screen. Another good tool is also in the mid screen. You can use a down special, which also bounces. It does only bounce down instead of straight back to you, but it's still a pretty good tool to get them off of you, especially if you're all the way back in the corner and you just need to make space so that you get out of the corner. You can always do like a hit confirm into something like this to just get distance. The EX counter is basically like a traditional DP. If they hit you, then it automatically counters for you, so you don't need to worry about multi-hitting attacks or weird timings on attacks where you might actually accidentally get hit with just using your like EX counter into a follow-up. That is a pretty good way to get them off of you is just using EX counter. So don't be afraid to use that meter. I actually highly recommend using as much meter as possible. You gain a lot of meter in this game. As you can see with metered version of this, you gain back 25% of the meter just from a hit, and on block you actually get refunded 12%, as you can see in the top left. And the final thing I wanted to talk about are some like block strings that I kind of found. So as I said in the beginner section, that using the U spam spaces you out at a pretty good distance, and the reason why is actually because your EX dashes, depending on the range, will be safe at certain distances. So now that we're in the corner, I'd say just get used to this hit confirm. It's kind of difficult to do, but essentially you want to hit and then go at an upwards angle and then straight down, and by the time you recover, the opponent will still be falling, so you can actually go for a combo. As you can see, it combos into each other, and then you can keep going into more damage. That's about all I wanted to talk about for this guide. So just get used to these fundamentals, and I'll leave you with these combos.